welcome to Video Games Revisited. Today we have another viewer request. This one comes from Atombat, and he suggested I should review River Raid on the Atari 2600.
Now the Atari 2600 version was the original, and later on it was ported to the 5200, the 8-bit Atari family, the ColecoVision, Intellivision, ZX Spectrum and many others. So as you can see, the graphics look pretty nice for an Atari 2600 game, and the background isn't just a plain black night sky that we're so used to seeing. And other than the constant whir of your jet and explosions from the enemies you've shot down, there isn't really much sound to speak of. But as you're about to see, this doesn't really affect the game negatively, there's so much going on. River Raid's a scrolling shooter game where you take control of a plane and fly up a river, blowing up helicopters, ships, planes and balloons, gaining points for each kill, with some typical arcade scoring based upon whatever it is you're shooting down. Thankfully, the rate of fire in River Raid is far greater than I've come to expect from an Atari 2600 game, and I've got myself quite used to only being able to fire one shot and having to wait for that to make contact before I can fire the next. This high fire rate really adds a lot to the game, with a feel of intensity that I haven't found with an Atari 2600 game, and allows an impressive amount of enemies to be thrown at you. The first appearances, I was fairly horrified with this game, as it looks like you're flying over a rural area mercilessly blowing up sailboats, fuel depots and helicopters right outside of some rather innocent looking housing. However, if you read the back of the box, you'll discover this is some kind of cowboyish military operation where you're just gunning down enemies to get to these bridges, which are to be destroyed, presumably for strategic reasons. Blowing up of these bridges acts like a checkpoint, and for each one you destroy, if you should lose a life, you'll go back to this point to continue your River Raid. Along with these points that have been thrown in purely to be destroyed, an element of strategy is added to the game in the form of the fuel depots you may have noticed me flying over. Whilst simply blowing up these fuel depots will rack you up some points, flying over them tops up your fuel tank for your plane, enabling you to carry on playing, and if you just simply destroy these fuel depots you won't get very far at all. Whilst this element of strategy isn't technically impressive, it changes the tone of the game substantially. Without it, the game would have very little to it other than the shooting down of the enemies, and even today it's not uncommon to see shooters that have very little else to them. As you fly up, the layout of the river changes drastically. You'll have the wide open spaces, stretches of river divided into two with very different obstacles on each side, and even some very narrow sections to navigate. Each time you play, the layout will be exactly the same, but the variety of features and the differing AI that's assigned to each enemy stops repeated plays from becoming a chore. I also find it impressive that such a long stretch of river was actually programmed into this game. Almost every Atari shooter I've played so far is actually a very short game, and the variety and level design that had been programmed in normally takes the gamer about 2 minutes to see everything on offer. But from playing River Raid, I can honestly say that I haven't noticed stretches of river repeating, and if they do, it's done so well that I just haven't noticed. As a result, when you do finally die in River Raid, you'll find it's because you've fallen victim to the increasingly hectic gameplay, rather than just by an enemy that's become substantially faster. So overall, River Raid is an incredibly well balanced shooting game, and one of the most impressive available on the Atari 2600. The speed, fluid gameplay and sheer amount of enemies you face stop the game from getting boring, and the variety in level design and the amount of river there is to fly over will make repeated plays and getting further up the river incredibly rewarding. But that's about all there is to see. So thanks to Atombat for suggesting this game for this review, and hopefully I'll see you all next time for yet another revisiting of a classic video game. Take care.